Read from Peggy Noonan, who writes in the Wall Street Journal about Trump's tangle of rhetorical inadequacy. Here is a cliche, but only because it is true. In times of stress and fracture, people want a president who is calm in the storm, who speaks to the nation's moral conscience, recalls first principles, evokes what unites us. Mr. Trump did not do any of that. If a leader is particularly gifted, he could, in a moment of historical stress, succeed in speaking to the nation's soul and moving its heart by addressing its brain. This kind of thing comes from love of the country, our people, what we've been. It struck me this week, as he spoke, that his speeches and statements are particularly loveless. The public, Mr. Trump, is not without sentiment and occasional sentimentality, but the deeper wells of a broader love seem not there to draw from. 7 months in, people know they can look to him for a reaction, but not for comfort, inspiration, or higher meaning. And James Peterson, I just wonder, I've seen people who go on television and analyze for a living crying after hearing this president speak, weeping openly, distressed, disturbed, afraid,
Republicans,
embarrassed,
conservatives,
that their president is so inadequate.
I mean, when you think about this week, it's been a long week. And I'm particularly moved by what's going on in Barcelona because I was there with my family just a few weeks ago.
Wow.
We were on Las Ramblas. I was there with my wife, my daughter, my son. It's an incredible space, too. Like, there's so many people there from all over the world. And the idea that he would respond to that with some mythological thing about a general using pig's blood. I mean, the Islamophobic piece of it is one thing, but the absence of any kind of presidential sense of the world. And when you juxtapose that terrorist activity with what happened in Charlottesville and the president's response to that, remember, people feel vulnerable in the immediate aftermath of these kinds of incidences. They look to leadership to sort of edify them in that moment. And this president has been completely incapable of doing that.
You know, Donnie, the great Peggy Noonan wrote about his ignorance of who we have been, of what we have been. I want to add to that, because that's actually an incomplete list. He has a complete ignorance of who we are. This is the most short-sighted political move the man could make. This is narrowcasting in a country that has over 300 million people. This is narrowcasting for early GOP primaries. So this is what gets you at 34% in the approval, in approval polls. We've seen the narrowcasting, we've seen the targets, we've seen the hatred. It's shown itself in Charlottesville. But look at the response to Charlottesville. Look at all the people that went out, filled the streets, lined the streets, like this morning in Barcelona, people filling the streets, applauding, coming out, showing the strength. We saw the strength of a mother whose own daughter was slain by white supremacist hatred. Get up and say, you know what? I've lost my daughter, but if it brings more attention to this cause, so be it. We've seen this sort of hatred in Charleston. What did that bring up? That brought out for me, I think I don't know that I've ever been as moved outside of a church service as I was by the people of Charleston, who showed true love, showed true power, showed true compassion.
Forgiveness. Showed
forgiveness. I forgive you. Donald Trump is so disconnected from that country. He will never win another election, ever. He's narrowcasting, and that's the political insanity of this as well.
Joe, you're talking about humanity. I love this set of words, it's who we are. And we as a country are decent people, and we are all created equal. Now, Donald Trump is not a decent man. It's just no matter how you slice it. And the good things over the last few days, you're starting to see what I call the big peel. You saw Corker, and he used the word stability. He could have put mental stability in front. We know that's what he meant. You see the Republicans, you see the right-wing media, or the conservative media, with James Murdoch, with what he did. You see the business community.
And by the way, not just James Murdoch, which obviously very powerful, but also you see day in and day out on Twitter feed some of the most conservative voices on the right, coming out every day going, no, this is not conservatism.
Yes.
This is Trumpism.
So the fundamental
yeah.
pillar is conservatives, business, Republicans starting to peel. And it's time for people to choose sides. It's time, Mika, you touched on this in the early hour, that Gary Cohn is a very, very decent man. We have a lot of the same friends who privately, is upset. No. Once you stand next to this man now, you're standing next to a man that in some way or shape or form has endorsed the Klan and Nazi, period.
Well,
that's on his lapel pin now. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. And I understand the generals who are not going to leave because they have a rationale. You know what? We got to keep this guy
safe.
But if you're Steve Mnuchin, who's a Jew, and if you're Gary
right
Cohn, or you're Dina Powell, these are all good people.
How about Elaine Chao? They were standing next to him.
You are literally and figuratively, and this is the time the peel has to continue. This is a man who is ill. We're seeing it. That's now. It's almost pathetic the way he's behaving now. He is ill, and the peel has to continue.
But there's been no peel in the White House. Remember, Nicole Wallace came on this show on Wednesday morning and said, if you don't resign en masse this morning, you'll be forever tainted by what the president did yesterday. Nobody's walked out yet. Sam Stein, I want to underscore Joe's point. This is a quote from Bob Corker, playing on President Trump's famous slogan. He said, Bob Corker, this is Republican from Tennessee, Bob Corker, quote, the president has not demonstrated that he understands what has made this nation great and what it is today, effectively saying President Trump does not understand the country over which he presides.
I mean, it's been a tough week for everyone, I guess. But I don't necessarily know if I agree with you guys. I think what's made this week remarkable is that Trump has articulated what has been previously a sort of ugly underbelly of our nation. We are and have had a fairly nasty past when it comes to race relations. And what he's done is he's essentially taken what has been a dog whistle and he shouted it out. And this is why it's so appalling to us, is that for the first time, at least that I can remember, and certainly maybe Joe can speak to this more, but for the first time you have a president who is actually articulating these things that have been the subtext for a while. This is a Southern strategy on steroids. And it's not just about race in this case, it's about religion too. Watching the video of those Nazis walking through the streets of Charlottesville, chanting Jews will not replace us, was really, really difficult. And for a president who has a son-in-law and a daughter who are Orthodox Jews, I don't know how he can actually stand there and say there are some good people.
Where are they, by the way?
That's his family.
Well,
that's his family.
On vacation.
Andrea Mitchell, I know you have covered foreign policy and politics for decades, and I just have to ask you, that press conference, Steve Mnuchin, Elaine Chao, Gary Cohn, they're standing with the president, standing by his side as all of this came out of his mouth. And at this point, what's the decision? Is the decision to step up, do something hard to influence this presidency, or become complicit? Or is that too stark a choice?
I guess everyone has to make their own moral choice. You could not do it. I know I could not do it.
There's no way.
But they have to make a choice based on what they believe is the greater good. I understand, frankly, why John Kelly is there. I really do. And I understand for sure why Mattis and the Joint Chiefs. Look at the way the Joint Chiefs all spoke out. And the chairman of the Joint Chief in Beijing, Joe Donford, on his way back from a really tough trip in Asia and heading into these the joint military exercises that are supposed to start this weekend and Monday. And the threat from Kim Jong-un that, okay, I'll take a pause and I won't fire that missile toward Guam and precipitate what could be a nuclear confrontation if there's a retaliation and an escalation, depending on whether you step down and don't do that exercise. And they're making these decisions now. What kind of exercise are we going to pull back, or are we going to be consistent? These are the decisions these people are making. And you have this incredible moment where the president does not only not come out on camera after Barcelona, but ends up with that false internet rumor that lie about General Pershing. I mean, how do you get your arms around your head around that? I don't know what I would do in that situation, but I know there's a mix of ambition and patriotism and duty and fear that may be on the domestic side among White House staff. But I give the military a total pass. I think they need to stand firm.
I understand that. I was talking about the people who were standing right there.
I know you are.
Is Elaine Chao still standing by both men? Why?
When one is embracing white supremacists,
come on,
and attacking her husband,
and trashing her husband.
There's,
I mean, trashing her husband, and she stands there every day while Donald Trump is trashing her husband. Here, he's preaching moral equivalency with white supremacists and neo-Nazis, and just standing there.
So Elaine Chao, Steve Mnuchin, and Gary Cohn, look at the picture of yourself standing by this president.
And James, Sam brings up a good point. He's talking about Jews in the administration that are sitting back saying nothing. Let me talk about my people. Let me talk about evangelicals. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church that didn't have the best history in the past, a Southern Baptist church that had to move beyond a lot of that, that's still fighting to move beyond a lot of that. But forget about the Southern Baptist Church specifically. What about evangelicals? What about the evangelical leaders that are supporting this man? What about the evangelicals across the South, across America, that hear him making common cause with white supremacists, getting praise from David Duke? And you have the story in the New Testament of the Good Samaritan. Right? You've got Jesus, one of the first things you read, the words from Jesus' mouth in the New Testament, the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the poor in spirit. You can go to the Sermon on the Mount a couple of chapters later. What does Jesus say? He says, you've heard it said, love your friends and hate your enemies. I say love your enemies too. And he says, you know how often you have to forgive? 70 times 7, which means you have to keep forgiving forever. And he says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. I want to know, with the president's evangelical task force, where are those leaders? Why won't they speak out? Because they're speaking for, in my opinion, something much bigger than a political faction. They're speaking for a church, and they're speaking for their faith, and they have been sickeningly quiet.
Or at least they should be. I'm impressed with your biblical knowledge, Joe. But I think Trumpism is a slippery slope. And the folks who wanted to align themselves with Trump and with Trumpism thought they were going to get something out of it, whether that was tax breaks or whether that was Gorsuch. The Supreme Court nomination piece of this was very, very big for evangelicals. And if you talk to some of them, Joe, they will tell you that that's still a win for them. That's still a big enough win for them.
So he can embrace Klansmen. He can embrace white supremacists.
Even in this context, they will still chart that up as a win, something that's very, very important for them politically. Now,
you can't argue that because Mike Pence would make this.
Well, exactly.
So that's a false argument at this point.
Mike Pence actually.
I'm only telling you what evangelicals would say.
But what I'm saying is Mike
right
Pence
now.
is even. I mean, Donald Trump's not even conservative.
He's not even conservative. But again, it's a slippery slope. You make this bargain saying this is what we're going to get. And who knows what Trump is going to do?
Guess what? You're not going to get it. Step up, do the right thing. It's not that hard.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Well,
and again, they have to look to their religion.
They
have to look to their religion and look to God in order. Our soul, that's right. To make a moral decision. But the morality of this presidency is vacant.
I mean, Joe, what you said about Charleston and what the mother of Heather Heyer has been doing, that's grace. And that's what the country needs right now from the White House, and that's what we are not getting.
That's not great.
I do want to say there are priests and pastors across the country who have spoken up very strongly in this week, but his closest friend, I think, in the evangelical community is Jerry Falwell Jr., the president of Liberty University, who campaigned with the president and endorsed him early on. He tweeted 2 days ago, this is the day after the Trump press conference at Trump Tower, he tweeted, "Finally a leader in the White House, jobs returning, North Korea backing down, bold, truthful statement about Charlottesville tragedy, so proud of real Donald Trump." That's from Jerry Falwell Jr.
There you go.
Sam Stein, so there you go. There are some people that, they don't even get 30 pieces of silver and they'll sell their souls.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And, you know, power is an amazing magnet for a lot of people. It forces them or compels them to overlook moral bankruptcy in certain cases. I guess if you are looking at this past week, there are reasons to be heartened. There's been admonishment of Trump from the military establishment, from top congressional leaders in his own party, from the CEOs of corporate America who were serving on his own councils. And that's an interesting and important development, I would argue. But I fear, and I think a lot of people fear, that we are at this place where we will essentially move on to the next crisis or legislative battle. And when Congress comes back in September, there's a whole host of things that they have to deal with that are all massive policy lifts. We have a government to fund. We have a debt ceiling crisis that's on the horizon. You have the possibility of tax reform and maybe an infrastructure bill. And my guess is, and maybe I'll be wrong, but my guess is that as soon as we move on to another dramatic story, perhaps something international will happen, that will kind of put this in the rearview mirror. I mean, it's very hard for me to actually remember that it was 1 week ago that it felt like we were on the precipice of a nuclear standoff with North Korea. That seems quaint and in the distance almost, but that happened. And I think we have almost too good a metabolism for news these days, and I think we need to stop at certain points and say, you know what, let's not let this story go. Let's continue to gnaw on it and chew on it. And I think this is one of those stories.
Well, thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.